It is a really great privilege for Bocconi to welcome the President and Vice Chair of Microsoft, Brad Smith. We are honored and indeed excited to have you as our keynote speaker on this occasion, which marks the most significant moment in the academic year. As Microsoft's President and Vice Chair, Brad Smith leads a team of more than 1,500 business, legal, and corporate affairs professionals located in 54 countries and operating in more than 120 nations. He plays a key role in spearheading the company's work on critical issues involving the intersection of technology and society, including cybersecurity, privacy, artificial intelligence, environmental sustainability, human rights, immigration, and philanthropy. In his recent best-selling book, co-authored with Microsoft Carol Ann Brown, entitled Tools and Weapons, The Promise and the Peril of the Digital Age, Brad Smith urges the tech sector to assume more responsibility and calls for governments to move faster to address the challenges that new technologies are creating. As you might remember, Mr. Smith, or dear Brad, if I may, you and I had a conversation almost 20 years ago. That conversation, which included Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, yourself in a very prominent role, my team at the European Commission, and me, was not always easy, but was always, I think we can agree, interesting, conducted with strong determination on both sides and huge mutual respect. I believe we can say that those exchanges and the decision that they led to had an important role in shaping the future of the European Union, of Microsoft, and of antitrust and competition policy well beyond Europe. Maybe also on corporate culture and on the structure and behavior of what was then called the new economy. You might remember that we would today call as technology industry, maybe. And there is a perfect fit between the imprint that our rector, Gian Mario Verona, gave to his inaugural speech just minutes ago, entitled Towards a Sustainable Capitalism in the Digital Century, and what you, Brad, are going to bring to us today. We are most grateful to you for having accepted our invitation, as well as to Silvia Candiani, CEO of Microsoft Italy, but above all, with your permission, for all of us, the chair of the Bocconi alumni community. Brad, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, thank you. Let me first say what a pleasure and indeed an honor it is for me to be with all of you, and I couldn't agree more. I came to work here near Seattle this morning thinking, President Monte, about our conversations of almost 20 years ago. They were not always easy, but they were always grounded in mutual respect. And I think they even advanced mutual understanding. I certainly learned a lot from them. I remember them so well. And they were one of the defining moments in many ways in my professional career. and certainly for many of us who still work at Microsoft today. And it's always been with the deepest appreciation of really the best traditions that one finds at great universities that we all brought to those discussions. An interest in not just talking with each other, but listening to and learning from each other. And I think that's at the essence of what the students of every generation have the opportunity to learn and apply anew. Uh, what I thought I would do this afternoon is spend a few minutes talking about three things. First, I want to talk a bit about the world that today's students inherit. Second, I want to talk about the changes and challenges that today's students will need to address in their next decades of leading Italy and the world forward. And third, I want to conclude with a couple of thoughts about what I think that means for the importance of the education that today's students have the opportunity to pursue. But let me start with that first one. Every generation inherits the world. We all do. In some ways, we inherit it when we're young. We inherit it when we attend universities. We don't get to run it the way we want in our youth, but we know that that opportunity will come. What is the world that is being inherited by this next generation, by those of you who are students today? Well, in many ways, I had the chance to reflect on this last month. I was in Glasgow, in Scotland, to attend COP26, where so much of the discussion was about the state of the world that the next generation is inheriting. And in many ways, it was almost a bit poetic. People didn't talk about it, but it was fitting that the world returned to Glasgow to talk about the state of the earth. Because in so many ways, it was at Glasgow that the state of the world that exists today was shaped. It was at another great university, the University of Glasgow. It was in 1757 that James Watt worked on and perfected his steam engine, a steam engine and an invention more broadly that would start the world on a path to the first industrial revolution. An industrial revolution that has in so many ways continued ever since for roughly 275 years. We're now in, by some people's accounts, the fourth industrial revolution, building on the new economy that President Monte mentioned a few minutes ago. Think about the changes that that technology has brought to the world. It has changed the world. It has created a level of prosperity that no one alive in 1757 could have even imagined. The kinds of abilities that I have today to join you in Italy from a camera that hadn't yet even been conceived of 3 centuries ago, thousands and thousands of kilometers away. It's not just prosperity that this technology advanced. It really made possible the democratic societies in which we live today. If you think about the consolidation of Italy from separate kingdoms into a single nation, the consolidation of Germany, the expansion of the United States, all three of these countries couldn't be governed without the technology that first was born in the 1700s. We certainly could not have become healthy democratic societies without this constant advance of technology. So prosperity and democracy, I think, find their roots in those inventions. But not everything that has happened has been as positive. We live in a world with more inequality today than the world of 3 centuries ago, in part because some parts of the world have advanced and have benefited so clearly and directly from that prosperity, while other parts of the world are still working to catch up. And even in industrial countries like Italy and the United States, you see a level of inequity that is obvious cause for concern. And then there's the fourth and final aspect of the world that today's students inherit. It's the carbon price, the bill that must now be paid. Because all of this technology, all of these inventions have relied on carbon fuels, carbon based activities to move forward. Last year, humanity, almost 8 billion of us around the world, were responsible for 53 billion tons of carbon emissions. And as we recognize so clearly, that is not something that is sustainable. So the world that today's students inherit is extraordinarily characterized by this mixture of, well, say, wonder and debt. Debt in the form of the carbon bill that must now be paid. Which brings me to the second thing I wanted to talk a little bit about. What are the challenges that today's students are going to need to address? Each one of us, when we attend a university as a student, has the opportunity to look to the future. We have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and at the same time to help dig out of the problems that those ahead of us have left behind. And today's students faces an extraordinary combination. The first thing, the thing that I think will define your careers more than anything else, that will impact every aspect of your lives, is the need in the next 3 decades to decarbonize the local, the national, and the global economy, to create a sustainable future that is based on a net zero economy by the year 2050. That doesn't mean that carbon emissions will go from 53 billion to zero, but they need to go to net zero. It probably means that we need to get carbon emissions down from 53 to 10 billion and then remove 10 billion tons of carbon from the environment every year. This is going to reshape every part of every economy, and it is going to require an extraordinary amount of new technology and new invention and new research and new learning that in many ways will start at universities. It will reshape the way that we create energy in the world. It will require new advances in wind energy, solar energy, we hope nuclear fusion, new inventions for long duration battery storage that will make it possible to collect energy when the sun is shining and then use it after the sun has set. It will require new inventions in order to reduce carbon emissions. We'll need sustainable aviation fuel so that the world can continue to fly and get the benefits that come from travel. We'll need to change the way we produce steel and cement so that these processes do not emit carbon. Agriculture, one of literally humanity's oldest activities, will need to change as well. And then there will be new technologies that will be needed to remove carbon from the environment. Technologies like direct air capture, technologies like carbon sequestration and storage. In short, the world of 2050 will be shaped in so many ways by technologies that have not yet been invented or perfected, by companies that have not yet been started, by industries that are only now being born, by research that today is just a glimmer in our eye. And all of this will rely on a number of other advances as well. So the first big change that today's students will need to grapple with is really all about sustainability. There's a second change that in many ways I believe could be equally impactful. And that's about one of the oldest factors that always shapes human populations. It's demographics. Today's students will inherit a world, and those of you in Italy will inherit a nation that will change greatly over the next 20 years. Think about this. As you all know better than me, Italy is a nation of just over 60 million people. Of those 60 million, the largest part of the population, 18.3 million people, is currently between the ages of 45 and 65. So during the next 2 decades, 18 million out of 60 million people will reach an age when many people choose to retire and stop working. And like every era of human history, They will be replaced by younger people. But what is most notable about Italy and so many parts of the world today is that the group that will replace them has fewer numbers. In fact, if you look at the group of people in Italy between the ages of 5 and 25, the group that will need to succeed that generation with 18.3 million people, it only has 10.7 million people. That is more than 40% smaller. That's an extraordinary difference. And so the second change that people will have to grapple with, that you students today will have to address, is how to ensure that 10.7 million people can advance the nation, even though you have 40% fewer of you to do it. That leads to the third change. How will you do this? How will every nation that's facing this demographic change address this enormous technological challenge with fewer people? Well, the answers will be many, but one clearly will require more technology. If we are going to grow prosperity, if we are going to grow GDP, I know any good economist, and you are at a university that has many, will say that if we have less labor, we're going to need more technology, and we will have less labor. So we're going to need to find new ways to put technology to work, all kinds of technology. But at bottom, the foundation for all of the technological change that will be needed, whether we're talking about wind and solar power or direct air capture or anything in between, is actually digital technology. It's the ability to put data to work, to use data analytics to identify how to move more quickly, the ability to harness cloud computing, the ability to use artificial intelligence to complement human beings so that we can all accomplish more together. We will need to rely on digital technologies that we haven't yet perfected, technologies like quantum computing as but one that will likely play a critical role in helping us solve many of the other technological and scientific challenges we need to address. And the need to use digital technology in an even bigger way than we do today will make more important every technology issue that the world is worrying about already. I think we live quite rightly in a world where people live about and worry about many more issues than President Monti and I discussed in Brussels 2 decades ago. We were at the forefront of a conversation then about what technology meant for antitrust. Well, today, the world is just asking about technology and every kind of trust. What does it mean for privacy? What does it mean for security? What does it mean for humanity when artificial intelligence can make decisions that for millennia, for the entirety of human history, could only be made by people? These are the challenges that the next generation of students will need to help us address. These are the challenges that today's technology companies, that companies like Microsoft, need to step up and do even more to think about and to work together to advance. And as we do this, we need to put technology to work to continue to protect democracy at a time when disinformation and cyber attacks are putting democracy at risk. We need to put technology at work to address that gap in equity. We need to ensure that the entire world has access to broadband technology, to inexpensive devices, to the skills, the digital skills that the next generation and that every generation will need in order to succeed. So we confront today a broad array of both technology opportunities to help us advance prosperity and decarbonize the economy and technology challenges. And we need to address them together. So this is a third aspect of the change that will come. But these three are not the only ones. There's a fourth I want to touch upon as well. There's one other aspect of the world that's also changing. It has gotten smaller. Carbon is like COVID. It's released into the air and it spreads around the world. It doesn't recognize borders. It doesn't respect borders. The only way to manage a global pandemic and the only way to manage a global climate crisis is for the world to work more closely together. The only way to manage the technology challenges of a world where technology has become so global is for the world to work together in new ways. But the world is also a complicated place. In many ways, what we're seeing is more governments seeking to make more decisions on the same issues more quickly than in the past. And that's a good thing. But it does require more coordination. Coordination within the European Union itself, between Brussels and Rome and Berlin and Paris and all of the other national capitals. But we also live in a world where the United Kingdom is no longer part of the European Union, where the United Kingdom is playing another important role, not just as a distinct economy, but as a distinct regulator at making important policy issue decisions and addressing issues with global implications. We're seeing the governments in the United States and Canada, in China, and Australia, and South Korea, Japan, and literally around the world, all needing to work more closely together. Because only by working more closely together do I believe we can make the changes that will be needed to decarbonize the environment, to address changing demographics, and to harness the power of technology responsibly. All of these are not just issues of this day. These are all trends, 4 trends that I think will define your lives and your careers. So then let me conclude with just a couple of thoughts about what I think this means for today. What would I do if I were a student today? Well, in some ways, I would do the same things that I did when I was a student in the 1970s and 80s. And in some ways, I would do things differently. I would still almost certainly start by studying what I studied then. I focused on the social sciences, the liberal arts. That was my passion. History and international relations, economics and political science. I used that to go get a degree in law. I would seek to do what I had the opportunity to do of that same age. It gave me my first opportunity as an American to travel to Europe on a scholarship so I could do research. It gave me and my wife the opportunity to go spend a year studying at the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva. I think I would use the opportunity once again with even greater urgency to learn everything I could, not just about the country where I had grown up, but about the larger world in which we now live. But there are things that I would do differently as well. Oh, when I was a student, there was a computer lab, but it was a very small number of people who ever went to it. I was not one of them. I didn't quite understand what those people were doing with these stacks of punch cards that they carried around, sometimes in their backpack from place to place. We studied statistics, but data science, well, you never put those 2 words together. We talked about biology and chemistry. We talked about physics, but we didn't really talk about computer science. We didn't talk about data science. And yet I think today, it doesn't matter what you're studying. I hope you'll study some computer science and some data science. And if you're one of those individuals who spends all of your time with computers, I would urge you to take some of that time away from the screen, because I think everyone who is majoring in engineering and science and the computer fields needs a strong dose of other parts of the liberal arts, including fields like history and philosophy and economics and international relations. The truth is, the successes that the world needs from the next generation of students will require a more multidisciplinary grounding than the education that somebody like I got 30 or 40 years ago. That is the opportunity that you have. And frankly, this is what the world needs of you, to take this time to learn everything that you can about more fields than some of us learned about in decades past. I think then I would leave you with one wish, one hope, even one request. I hope as this generation of students goes not just to university, but enters the world, I hope that you will bring to the world a combination of high ambition and persistence, and even a little bit of patience, because the world will need all three from you. I think it's good that the next generation, like so many young generations, myself included, looks around the world with less than satisfaction about the world that you inherit, that voices frustration about the slow pace of change. Harness that energy and use it to define the high ambition that you will need to bring to the world in order to make the world a better place. And I think it's right that high ambition on many days should lead even to a sense of impatience, a sense that we need to move faster. But I would also say that if there's one thing that you will learn, I believe, it's one thing that every generation learns. You cannot solve the world's great problems in months. You can't even solve them in a few years. You need to get started. You need to move as fast as you can, but success will require sustained effort, persistence, commitment, even optimism, and as I said, on some days, some patience as well, including perhaps a little patience with those of us who will eventually leave this world to you in the hopes that you will do better. In short, I think that for the students of today, I hope that you'll remember with a little bit of wonder the things that we take for granted, the technologies that people of the last 275 years have invented. I hope you'll remember with appreciation the benefits that this has created. I hope you'll ground yourself in the enormous changes through which you'll have to navigate. And I hope you'll learn everything you can from the multiple fields that are required, so that you in many ways can not only build on what those of us who are older will leave for you, but so you can do better than us. So you can leave the people that will follow after you the better world that that posterity deserves. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I hope you can, I wish you well. The world needs you to do well.
Andiamo là? Ok. Eh?
Parla tu, parla tu.
President Smith,
Thank you.
you were great. You covered such a broad range of vital topics and dimensions. You showed to us how technology can be human and even humane. I think you gave enormously strong motivations to our students, and your message today will never be forgotten. But you must visit us in person here at Bocconi, maybe even before sustainable aviation fuel is fully invented.
You can count on me. I would be delighted. It would be wonderful to see you, to see all of you. Thank you very
And
much.
you, and the final note, you and I met on antitrust, and today you brought us all a lot of trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bravo, bravo.